Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. On today's show, I'm excited to share my conversation with Vijay Swami, CEO and co-founder of Draup, a company that's revolutionizing how organizations understand and plan their workforce strategy through AI-powered talent intelligence. We dive deep into some fascinating territory. We'll explore how Vijay and his team are building a sense-making engine for talent data, pulling together everything from macro labor statistics to micro job movements, university data, startup information, even news signals to give HR leaders unprecedented insights into the labor market. Vijay and I talk about why AI isn't the job killer the headlines make it out to be, with some compelling data to prove his points. We also get into the ethics of AI, how Draup has built traceability and explainability into their platform by design, not as an afterthought. Now, if you're wondering how to tell a better story with your data, or how to get finance, IT, and HR on the same page for your next big initiative, Vijay has some great insights on that too. Plus, we'll touch on verification skills, a whole new category of capabilities that Vijay believes will be critical as AI-generated content proliferates throughout organizations. So whether you're in people analytics, strategic workforce planning, or just curious about where AI and talent intelligence are headed, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Vijay Swami. How are you today, Vijay?
Doing great, Bob. Super privileged to meet with you. I know time is valuable. Thanks for having me here.
Likewise, no, it's a pleasure to have you. We did get a chance to meet in person at People Analytics World in New York City a little while ago. Our mutual friend Randy definitely recommended that we have a chat. And so yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you and enjoyed your presentation at that event. So before we get into the meat of the conversation, I just thought you could give my listeners a little bit about your background and some of the companies you've started before and what led you to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Being all through my life, being kind of a data guy in different format, right? That's what I told at People Analytics as well. Like really started my life as a call center forecasting analyst. And one of my issues or something that I needed therapy for was how come when I model and tell something to business, the same story when a consultant from a big consulting company comes and says, people they say half of what you say, but they buy that, right? So I always think that the internal data people needed better solutions, better packaging, deeper insights. And that's sort of what led me to build or co-found my first kind of a consulting company called Zinnow, which is a management consulting company, still doing well, still growing. And then following that, I co-founded another company called TalentNeuron, which we sold to CEB and been part of that journey for a few years. But by then, Bob, as you know, the data infrastructure, cloud computing, and AI was just furiously growing. Like by the time we did this, all like 2017, 2018 timeframe, we wanted to build a really innovative company that doesn't go necessarily for simplicity at all times. We wanted to crunch complex data sets. And as you know, in SaaS, the focus was always, point and click one use case. That's about it you can do in the platform because it gets overwhelming for the users, use case, all that. But we had a different view to say that if AI is going to be becoming very powerful, we obviously we did not know it will become this powerful, but maybe we should go through like 3-4 years of pure R&D where we can look at not just looking at the labor market through not just a job description JD lens, which was kind of the trend at that time. How do we bring in more infographics? How do we bring in multiple taxonomies, not just anchoring it on BLS, right? So our ONET. How do we bring in startups data, which is an unstructured data? How do we bring in universities data? Each university website is, so different. So signals, newscast, all that, and then inform the labor market in terms of talent availability, AI potential, location footprint, peer strengths. And that's sort of what led us to build Draup. And 8 years later, we are serving 250 plus customers. We have customers across the globe, and people are all, most importantly, we believe across the industry, we have the top AI talent. Like we have 150 plus people. Majority of them are machine learning AI researchers. I feel like we're well positioned with this AI wave that has entered. And last month, we were actually awarded by OpenAI for the most, within our industry, most efficient use of all their models. So we are very, very happy that we are in the right direction. So,
No, that's amazing. Yeah, when I think about all of those different data sources that you're talking about, I mean, I think you've sort of built this platform that takes that amalgamation of, the macro data. I don't want to call it local data, but definitely micro, like, job movements and some of the things that may not hit the Bureau of Labor Statistics, at least not in a timely fashion. And then you've got the combination of both structured and unstructured data. And so you're really sort of building this almost like sense-making kind of engine when it comes to talent and labor intelligence, right?
our infrastructure is on AWS, and AWS R&D program gave us a lot of credits in the beginning. So we just went fun with it. And I think I love the word sense making, right? I think for at the end of the day, if whether it's people analytics, the users we serve are people analytics, SWP, TA professionals, and a little bit on the L&D side as well. For them, we have launched this agent called Curie that also takes all this data and really tells the story, right? So, for example, in our platform, you can ask Curie to say, meeting with my CHRO, I've selected, say, Switzerland for data center or Switzerland for R&D. What are the challenges I should be ready for? And then it prepares them with the narrative on why that location is, what questions they may come. So it also acts as a leadership preparation engine for analytics folks, data analytics folks, because that's where I felt early on I was lagging. Like going back to the opening story, at that time, even though I was like, oh, I'm doing a lot more, they're doing less, like the usual mindset. But then one other thing that I felt the consultants do well, especially the big consultants do really well, is the storytelling, right? They use 1/4 of the data that we typically use as data professionals, but they tell the narrative so well. And that's something I think it's good for a profession that using some of these AI tools, if we can make that happen, that's one of our dream as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of ties into what I wanted to ask you about that you've talked about in your presentation at People Analytics World, which was around telling that story and understanding. Obviously, if you're going to tell a good story and a compelling story and try to, build that business case and get funding, you've got to understand your audience. And so that could be not necessarily one, senior executive, one decision maker, but it could be across domains. So getting, HR, IT, and finance all sort of on the same page, recognizing that there are, benefits to. We're going to try to sort of raise all boats, right?
Correct.
And so we're going to look across these domains and say, if we work closely together, this is what we can expect. This is the new higher value, targets that we can go after. This is how we can fill these skills gaps that we anticipate, those kinds of things. Right?
Absolutely. Because, I'm glad you referred that, because when it goes to, like, HR is doing ton of work on, there's just so many projects that's happening within the analytics, people analytics, or strategic workforce planning, or TA spaces, right? The challenge is we're typically very, very hard on running the processes behind that, working with so many systems. The HR tech stack is just ever growing. So we do some great work. The point that the Draup platform where we try to differentiate is, how do we, in an agentic AI-driven way, how do we minimize the headaches associated with the data handling? So we pretty much integrate with Workday, SuccessFactors, Snowflake, Databricks, and so on, right? So that's number one. Number two is the cradle to grave data modeling story. So this is what we harvest. This is how we normalize across taxonomies. Here is the transparent view of mapping of that. And here is how you handle it with your internal taxonomy. And this is how we interpret it, that, making that modeling layer transparent. And the third one is giving a lot of context, because at the end of the day, if you're going to have a talk with CEOs or CEO, the business side, they deeply care about relevant peers. And that's not just industry. That's now, as you know, it's coming. Peers can be in multiple industries now. But really, what are peers doing? What are all the people who might target companies that I benchmark against? How are we doing there? And then the fourth layer is really triangulating all this and telling actionable items that can truly move the needle. Like, for example, you may have hundreds of skills with AI, but the biggest skill, that battery of skills that companies really need to worry about right now is what I call as the verification skills, right? So whether that is data verification, narrative verification, content verification, there is just a battery of skills evolving in that place. And none of the vendors in this place are really talking about that. Why? Because that's not there in the JDs. It's there more in research articles. It's more there in specific assets that we have mapped to mind, right? Like, so if organizations can improve or train on verification skills, that's going to improve the data integrity. That's going to improve preserve the narratives. Because otherwise, you have this scenario where documents are created by AI. It's just going from email to email. Nobody's actually fully reading it. They're adding a little bit more using AI. And then suddenly a 50-page document by weekend is now a 500-page document. It's just overwhelming. And even people who are reading it, I'm sure you know this, they are just putting it in AI and say, tell me the summary of this document, right? So is this a cascading effect that can harm the enterprise, right? So verification. So that's not just one skill. We have mapped like some 20 plus skills on that. So how do we bring the verification layer of enterprise really, really strong, right? So I think if we can be very specific like that, business, you can earn the trust of the business real quick and then say, hey, let's put a program for that. So
yeah, no, these are really important points that I agree. I mean, it's not just the vendors that I think are not focusing on this. I think people are. It's not that they're lazy. It's just, I think there's a underlying assumption, like, how am I as an individual going to know any better than these systems that these intelligent systems that are handling all of this. So it's not. I don't think it's necessarily that they want to take any kind of shortcut. I
no,
mean,
absolutely
they do
not.
genuinely
Correct.
want to trust the data, but like, how do you? I mean, it just seems like you're taking on an awful lot of responsibility in a way, being this sort of aggregator of all these disparate data sources that you don't necessarily control those data sources, of course. So how do you build? I mean, this kind of ties into agentic, and how do you build a trusted talent and data ecosystem such that you could identify like a weak link,
Correct.
in the chain, and say, let's you need to take a time out and go clean up your data, because the rest of us have gone through, as you have, this sort of your ISO and your ethical AI, bias detection, and you guys have a lot of people trying to do the right thing, and then you may have an ecosystem player who is maybe not meeting those sort of trustworthy standards.
Spot on. I mean, I think all the vendors want to do the right thing. Like, I think that generally our space is filled with quality players, right? So I think that's what keeps it exciting. It is more that constant quest as an industry that we have to, at the end of the day, we are only successful when the business looks at our data and say, yeah, this is spot on. This is helpful for me. This is moving the needle for my job roles. If we go and say, okay, here is the emerging skill, and they are saying like, oh, this is emerged like 2 years back. What are you talking about? Then you lose that trust transaction. So, and I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So the opportunity, the macro opportunity that people analytics, SWP, I look at this as like the data hungry professions within HR, right? I think we are at a kind of the golden age of doing the impossible in the next 2 years, because the leading into this, like before this open AI, many companies moved their data to cloud. I know some of them still are on-prem, but at least COVID forced us to think that part of the data infrastructure and say, okay, we need to have cloud systems. We need to work from different places. So the cloud journey was already on fire. And even hospitals, banks, everybody started embracing that, right? So because that's how you can fix your MRI machine, right? So nobody's going to come to your site to fix it, right? So
what I love about the Workforce Agility Limited Series by Cornerstone was we talked to executives and customers all about skills. Cornerstone has a wonderful background in learning and development, training, etc. Their LMS is world class, but they've centered the business now, not just on that, like building upon that, but building upon how everything has moved to the skills economy. So check out the limited series called Workforce Agility, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And it's just a wonderful series where we talk to their executives on the shift of why, and also their customers that are using it. So check it out whenever you get a chance. Appreciate it.
So we've been beneficiary of that, leading into AI. Now, certain data exchanges, like one of the things that we have done is model contextual protocol, like the MCP models. What that does is we've been wasting a lot of time on APIs. Like APIs are implementation, like protocol is so tough. Like you have to look at many things. Now, literally, you can copy the protocol, make the systems talk to each other a lot easily. Say, for example, your Databricks needs to extract something from Draup. It can automatically do that through an MCP protocol and stage it for you if you are a Databricks customer or if you are a Snowflake customer like that. So there is data exchange revolution that is happening in the second layer. Then the third layer is the model revolution, right? So this is where we built a model called ETTER, which is actually evaluates multiple assets, not just JDs, process maps, KPIs, contracts, SLAs. We call it input repository. We read all that and then say, these are all the tasks associated with the jobs. These are all the workloads. And it is the beauty of that system is really it is independent of job descriptions. We do take job descriptions, but we also look at multiple other assets and say, this is the true nature of the work that is happening in your enterprise. And that knowledge was not there with HR before for no fault of theirs. Like it's a massive piece of work that we are simplified. And now imagine with all these tools and infrastructure, with the knowledge of true nature of work, HR can do lot more. Hey, this is where coordination is happening. This is where breaking is happening. This is where the customers are escalating because we didn't do this checks. Like, so I think if I look at it through that opportunity alone, suddenly we can be the true heroes, right? So like we meaning HR as a profession, all of us can bring in a lot more insights. So that's what keeps me awake and keeps me going.
It's really fascinating to see how all these pieces are coming together, and you're giving more sort of ammunition to some of these folks who have been. I think about the people analytics community and strategic workforce planners and folks like that who, smart people bringing you the data. Maybe they weren't, to your point earlier, just telling the right story or telling a good enough story, but it just seemed like, boy, if the folks who are really bright and have all this supposedly trusted data, if they can't get their business case approved, like what hope is there for
Right.
other people?
You
So
saw that in New York. I mean, we have unbelievable
yeah,
PhDs and all that in the profession. So it's a question of making certain things like agentic or automated, however you want to call it. And then the narrative on this thing that is, I mean, you know this, Bob. I mean, it takes time. So it does require some failures before success comes in. So, but at least we have to attempt it and keep building that muscle. So AI is not going to entirely solve that. It's going to help you prepare for wargaming scenarios. But other than that, it's still, each meeting is a learning experience, as you know. So
when we think about I want to go back to the sort of, trusted AI platform, the ethical platform that you've built and you have audited. And I think a lot of that is because, well, I don't want to speak for you, but, it's not just that, there's these, there might be regulations here and there. We know there's a kind of a patchwork of legislation around the world, but I mean, it's also like this is a fundamental belief that you and your team have around trusted data is everything, and that should also be thought of in a human-centric way. We're talking about people's lives and livelihoods, and we want to understand that. So I thought we could just dig into that
right,
a little bit, and then and kind of bleed into some of the things I think we may have hit on in New York when we met, like around like digital twins and synthetic
right,
data, and how do we sort of model some of these things if data does happen to be missing, or you just want to simulate it with moving outside an organization to just kind of see what kind of insights or just how this could scale, or how this could be repeatable or repurposed and things like that. So yeah, so let me
yeah,
just ask you about the human centricity kind of angle to
right.
some of the things that you're doing.
I think trust. I mean, fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. Trust for our business, right, like in this context, is traceability and explainability, right? So that is beyond, like you correctly said, that's beyond legislation. We want to, in a genuine, transparent way, tell how our models are performing against other models, right? So that's a basic requirement now. So if you, in ETTER, when we say a task automation potential of a particular task or a job role is X%, we also give the how ETTER is performing, how GPT-5 is performing, how Perplexity Sonar is performing, Gemini 2.5 is performing. If we use those models and then index it and provide it in a macro without comparing, I feel like we are doing injustice to our customers, because our customers have the right to know. It's okay to use those models, but you have to say our model is performing like this against these models. So we kind of have mechanisms to compare with the standard battery of models across wherever we are doing estimation, if you're using AI to do the mapping. So that's number one. Number two, data sources. I think it's a little bit of a tricky thing, but because sometimes as vendors, you feel like you have to protect certain sources, right? So, but we have taken the opposite approach of documenting all the sources very, very granularly, including website links, what part we are extracting, what part we are normalizing, and things like that. So I think that is a change in DNA that it will happen in the vendor ecosystem, because just because you are taking data from a source, and if it's a public source, customers have customers have the right to know that, right? So that's what they are purchasing. Like, using many of them are not asking for replication. Many of them asking for, okay, these are all the types of sources that is going in. The third layer is what kind of interpretation you are making and how transparent you are about that. And I'll give you a quick example, right? So let's say I'm studying a profile. Like we have, in a big data, we study about 800 million, close to 1 billion profiles, right? So one of the things we do is taking the reported data across companies, we predict what is the core, skill that this person truly brings into, for example, right? So, okay, this is actually a software profile. Within software, they are focused on backend. Within that, they are focused on data engineering part of rapid streaming of data to cloud. Like that is their specialty. And we almost want to give that two-liner, one-liner, core aspect of that particular profile, right? So how do we do that? What are all the interpretations, documentations, models, papers around that? So I feel like the methodologies, papers, we have to over-communicate on that. And that is, like, we are also part of the Ethical AI Institutes, right? So one of the things that we often discuss is, yes, your customers may not read all the documents all the time, but if it is accessible, when they have an issue, they will go and refer, or you can even create a central repository and put some AI around that so that they can ask the question and pulls the right documents, right? So what it has created in our scenario is we write a lot of papers. We write a lot of papers on an ongoing basis, whether it is about model performance or a simple chi-square test, cluster analysis on, hey, we looked at these profiles across locations. Some profiles seem empty, some profiles seem... And that transparency, customers actually, so for example, we struggle a lot for profiles from Nigeria, Ghana, all these African locations. Now, it is always better to say that loud and make customer understand what we are doing for it. Like, how are we, if that is the limitation, this is the indirect way of where we are estimating, right? And 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we as a industry used to think that let's not bring it up unless it brings up itself, right? Because there is that fear that, okay, and not something you want to misrepresent, but for a vendor, there is always a fear, okay, if it comes up, we'll handle. If not, it may be fine because they may not even be looking at Nigeria, right? So as a location up, but that's changing. They are also growing. But the point being, we have to take steps to communicate the limitations of the system. And one of the things that we always do is get them into a detailed trial, even if they are ready to sign like tomorrow. Let's get them into a detailed trial, let them experience it, let them validate it. And if it is not a match, it's good to find out early on and also see the issues that they have is fixable from a documentation standpoint. Or they may say, hey, your documentation is not enough. And that's how your documentation base grows as well, right? So that's sort of the process that we learned as part of being the ethical AI community. And one of the reasons for that is we envisioned it as a SaaS AI company from day one, because by the time we started, the technologies are just flourishing, right? Like we got the earlier ride into that. And I think today we have empowerment within the organization where if I am being cryptic to, there was an example. I was not being cryptic. I didn't know. A company asked me a source. I just generically said like labor board, etc. Immediately, my analyst said, here is the specific source. Here is the link. You can go see the taxonomy. This is exactly what we are taking. So we have empowered that to override any leadership, including me, to give the right data to customer. And that transparency, that it's really a privilege to work with an organization like that, where they don't feel like if I give a specific source and explain the limitation, sometimes not all data sources are strong, will I be in trouble? And the answer is no. If I'm saying something wrong or I'm not saying enough, every analyst, every AI researcher in our company is empowered to correct that. And that is sort of the vigilant mechanism that we have built. And that's something we are very, very proud of. And I think that customers see that too, right? So
yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking back to your example before where it's like, this went through one AI and then it went to another AI or whatever. It's like, listen, here is the actual source material, and this is why we trusted. This wasn't like not a summary of a summary, or a sugar coated version or a
right.
cherry picked stat that came out of this, and or one AI missed context, and then it just went through this sort of daisy chain of different AI tools, which again I think is some of the fear that people have with some of these agentic solutions. Like your agent talked to my agent, which talked to that agent, and now I don't know
who made the
where
wrong
these things. Yeah,
call,
like
if it is a wrong call.
you don't know. So, but to your point, I mean, about not just the sort of explainability, but the traceability, to say, let's go back and figure out where something went askew, and to be able to do that, and then have the, in general, sort of observability to say, let's retrace our steps. Let's do, because you're going to get into some maybe root cause analysis kinds of things, and you need to go and retrace
right
the steps of where that came from.
One use case, right, that comes to my mind is we were helping companies. One company set up like their data science center in Mexico, right? And halfway through, they felt the generational representation for their data center felt a bit lower than what they had in mind or what they thought they heard from other companies, meaning gender representation. Sorry, I used the word generation. Gender representation, because they felt they should have more women representation. But when we showed all the data in terms of the macro labor metric, where it looked, when you compare the gender representation, this at a macro level, the macro number will always be bigger because it's aggregating so many things. But when they were able to use our taxonomy and double click, and reach at the specific level of data science, analytics, and things like that, they actually they realized they were doing much better than the available talent, right? So I think the way I look at it is the organizations carry a lot of anxiety, that which is informed by either incorrect data or no data. Now, we as SWP planners or people analytics, HR analytics folks can be the therapist using data and say, you know what? I know you have this anxiety, but that is a right anxiety, wrong anxiety. No need to have. We are actually doing. So overnight, I was told like many recruiters slept well, right? So once we
get ready to turn up the volume on your HR game. I'm Jay Arnold, former musician turned HR leader and host of Backstage Pass, the HR Rockstar. Each episode pulls back the curtain on key HR topics, from leadership lessons and bold career pivots to the latest in HR tech and talent strategies, featuring the rock stars within their industries. If you're ready to shake up the status quo and amplify your impact, this is your all-access pass. You can catch the show on the Work Defined Podcast Network and wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now, and let's rock the future of work together.
Made that so transparent, right? So if you don't give that, and if you're comparing with the highest occupational number, which is rolled into so many different, it's an aggregate of many roles, then you are going to have that unnecessary anxiety, right? So it is good to use that as a benchmark. Now, why is a small subset of analytics of machine learning should not have enough gender representation in that country? That's a different question. But that's not a recruitment issue at the company level, right? So I think that was like, wow, this is how data can be a therapist, right? So I was fascinated by that experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, speaking of anxiety, I wanted to ask you about AI making the headlines for reasons that aren't necessarily justified, meaning AI is sort of a scapegoat for, job displacement. And so I thought we could unpack that a little bit, and just really, I guess what you see, at a macro level, but then, if there's specific observations for specific
Right.
scenarios, because I do think certainly there's a difference between direct impact and indirect impact. And then there's just an excuse, right,
Right.
from the board or C-suite, right?
Companies that are using it for staff optimization, who may say because of AI we're doing that. I don't think we have enough data to say whether they went through a systemic AI-based evaluation, automated everything, and as a result, truly there is residual human staff, so we push them out. But I don't think they followed that. They basically wanted to cut, and they're proactively kind of cutting it, and then with the hope that things will even out. So I think the best, but I'm overall an optimist that there is a lot more work needs to happen by humans. The reason is because we've been working on this for so long now, right? It's almost 10 years now. 3 things we have to remember, right? So there is still tons of things in a job that we hate doing manually. That's where AI can help. That's number one. And in some ways, it is a welcoming thing for us to write the first draft of email, or get a highlights of the summary of a 1,000-page document, or point to the risk. Like, there is just so much that we shouldn't be doing, we do nowadays, and that AI can do well. AI is doing well, so that's number one. Number two, there is a lot of work that is not understood well in an enterprise. Like enterprise, as you know, Bob, like half of it is influencing, communicating, working with people, getting things done. That AI clearly cannot do anything. It's still largely enterprises a human body of work. So we can't just take, okay, there is 1,000 jobs in this company. That's what, that is the work that is happening. No, there is so much happening in an enterprise. Like that's why we have this concept called workflows. Like we created this workload, which is sum of tasks. But when work actually happens, let's say a marketing department, right? A marketing department may have a workflow called brand compliance, SEO posting, brand collateral development. They have like 10 or 15 workflows. And at that time, they are not thinking at a job role level. Like multiple job roles come together to do one workflow of brand collateral development, for example, right? So multiple skills come together. So the point being, more workflows are also coming in because of AI, because of AI coming in the marketing example. The kind of collateral we need to develop needs to be agent discovered also. That means your documents that will typically have a lot of diagrams, and you would have been, we've seen this already. Marketing collaterals are a lot more text driven now as opposed to complex infographics. Why? Because AI will not do a very good job of discovering those fine. During COVID, it was all infographics time. Like now you almost don't see that much. That is because we are now, discovery is not just humans, it's also agentic, right? So you want to position your product, solution, service, whatever it is, better through that lens as well. So the point being, there is a lot of new workflows coming in for humans as well. So I think it's now feels like a cliched statement, but it's true. If there are two people in that same marketing department, I said, like one knows how to use AI, one doesn't. The one doesn't will be at a point of disadvantage right now. So I think that goes without saying. That's like computer savvy skill, AI model skill. So we just need to definitely learn all that, understand the limitations, which model is better for what. That goes without saying. But it is not a job killer, because when we see, even though there has been a slowdown in the number of jobs that are opened in the last 1 year, if you unpack the data, it is because lack of skills clarity rather than, the economy, like the company's results are all going awesome, right? So the question that many of them have is like, what? We did this one very interesting study, Bob. I couldn't share it in New York, but we just completed that. For the same job family of data analyst, we indexed like bunch of roles within that, like 10 to 15 roles. The companies that had lot more clarity in skills descriptions, like if they very specifically say, I need SQL, Databricks, Snowflake, like that, those companies had lot more jobs open than companies that said data analyst is equal to analyze data, quantification of this, that very generic. That tells me the companies that are working very hard to define the skill stack very specifically are ready to invest in that because that stack is aligning well with the stack that they have purchased or implementing. So if they have repurposed their data analyst to the stack that which is functional in their company, then suddenly you need a lot of people. You realize like in that job, you need a lot of people. If you're still thinking data analyst, this generic function, do I need that? Do I not need that? Then suddenly you think, like, maybe AI can do that. If it is that generic, maybe AI can do that. So I think specificity in JD, specificities in skills, we will create employment. And there will be a little bit of a delay in that happening. But we see that, right? Like people don't hire for just a machine learning engineer just like that. Like now they are very, very curated to say, okay, is your job really transporting large volumes of data so that data is optimized? Your data engineer driven machine learning, or are you building foundational models? That's a completely different type of skills. Or you are more in that training phase. So it really depends. There is just so many flavors that comes within that machine learning itself. So the companies that understand that are willing to go and put money because they can. How do I put that asset quickly into a project, right? It's into a burning project. That's what is happening. So I'm a net AI job creator guy.
Yeah, no, it's glad to hear it. I think that puts first of all, it makes a lot of sense. I do think, going back to your point about sort of triangulating some of this, I think it puts a lot of pressure on people doing, skills intelligence kind of work, right? Because you need to understand that kind of mapping. How could I do a better job mapping, some generic sort of qualitative, skills to specific tools, but also understanding, well, I'm not going to eliminate a particular candidate because they don't know, one particular tool, because maybe that's not a strategic platform, maybe that's not a big deal, or maybe they know something similar and therefore they could easily, reskill and learn that. So I'm not going to exclude someone who could learn a new tool in a couple of weeks.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Or it could be, to your point, that something that, some type of AI solution could take on. So as you think about this and all the pieces, I often lately think about, without getting into whether agents should be in the corporate directory and be sort of anthropomorphized as part of the workforce, if you remove that part of the discussion, then strategic workforce planning is really strategic work planning.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Because you want to know who or what could be doing specific tasks and activities that formulate what used to constitute, a particular job. And so it just seems like your platform could go a long way to helping people figure out, okay, so let's say you do go to finance and HR and IT, and you do tell a good story and narrative, and they do, give you investment. Now the real work begins, and you've got to build this team, and that team is going to be some humans, some agents, some automation to try to make sure that workflow that you were describing is seamless and is an improvement both in efficiency and effectiveness than it was before. And now you're bringing together all of that disparate data. You can simulate pieces of that if you need to with synthetic data, synthetic personas or whatever. But now you give people this vision that says, here's option one. You can do it with 3 humans, 6 agents, and these 2 automation routines.
Exactly.
Or you could do it this way or whatever. And who's going to manage that? What are the metrics or whatever? And you're sort of bringing all of that intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Supply-demand gap cannot be just based on people, right? So in the previous example, if certain workflows are becoming agentic, you can say, hey, out of this 10 workflows, 2 are agentic, let the machines do that. And then that means we have capacity to pick up 2 more. We always wanted to do hyper product. Like if a company has 3 products, we always want to do a lot more on product 1 versus product 2. Let's pick up another workflow, right? So that is sort of what will happen, because enterprises, and I jokingly said this to one business leader, if you listen to the enterprises offsites that they do every year, every 6 months, there is unbelievable optimism, lot of projects, and then when you go back to your desk, you can't accomplish even half of, or if not fourth of that. So
right.
There is never shortage of work in enterprises. We thought, same day delivery is awesome, but now we're talking about like delivering within few hours, right? So there is no end to this customer attention, customer success, every industry, right? So at one point it was okay if certain machines were broken down, and then, literally a technologist would get in the plane and come and fix the 1 week of downtime. That was okay. But now within the hour, we need the machines fixed. So in a cloud-driven AI, in a multi-platform infrastructure way, we have fixed that. So I think there is no shortage of work in the world, and this is true for every single industry, right? So I think that's where I'm very excited to say, okay, these are all the work, these are all the tasks we need to do, these are all the workloads that corresponds to, and then these are all the workflows now. Then it becomes easy to say, okay, out of the 15 things we do, 3 things AI can do, maybe we can pick up 1 more, right? So
optimistic that we're going in the right direction. And I think with, platforms and solutions like yours who are doing things the right way, being responsible and trustworthy by design, it's encouraging, right? Because I saw early examples of this when I was working with IBM Research, right? These cognitive environments labs. I mean, we were talking to intelligent assistants 10 years ago, way before I knew the term generative AI.
You're doing it in a different versions of that. Yeah.
And I also think about, this, I spent a lot of time thinking about, this, humans plus AI, teaming and augmented intelligence and things like that. It just seems like, it's the work that you're doing that's helping that to come to fruition. And so I love all the work that you're doing.
We are on the same camp, and that's why we love talking to each other. Really privileged to be here, and looking forward to more meetups across conferences and across these type of events.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, Vijay, thank you so much for spending some time with me. This is a fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
A lot of great insights. So really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. Happy holidays, and looking forward to more meetups.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you again, Vijay. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.